All right, y'all. Before we dive in, a quick heads up.
This show is raw, real, and definitely not rated PG.
We're talking about adult themes, sexual content, and the kind of stuff you probably don't want blasting through your speakers at work or around your kids.
So grab some headphones, pour your drink of choice, and get comfy.
Oh, and just so we're clear, we are not licensed therapists, counselors, or sex couches. Sex coaches,
Sex coaches.
not sex couches.
We're just a couple of people sharing our lives experiences and sexy adventures and ethical non-monogamy. So with that, pull up a chair and enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond Monogamy. I'm Adam.
And I'm Pris.
And today we're pumped because we've got a guest who knows the law inside and out when it comes to non-traditional relationships. That's right. We're talking to Jonathan Lane. He's an attorney based in Maryland and DC who specializes in family law, custody, and helping ethically non-monogamous and polyamorous families navigate the legal system.
Yeah, and what makes Jonathan even cooler is that he's not just working with E&M folks from the outside, he gets it. He's out as a polyamorous himself and has spent years making sure people like us have someone in their corner when the courts, contracts, or custody battles come up.
That's right. So grab your coffee, grab your partner or your partners, and let's dive in. This is going to be one of those episodes where you'll definitely learn something that could protect you, your family, and your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So with that, welcome to the show, Jonathan. Thank you for being
Welcome.
here. Now,
Thank you.
I apologize. I know that we're just getting to know you, and so we're going to end up peppering you with all sorts of questions here, but that's what we're here for. Jonathan, if you could just kind of break down for us, what made you shift from general family law into focusing on non-traditional families?
It was actually my movement to a full family law practice was really simultaneous with engaging with the non-traditional family world. I had done a variety of things as a lawyer, gone to a big fancy law school, but had graduated in the midst of the Great Recession, and so I was sort of wandering around the legal market trying to figure out my niche and where things made sense. And it had been suggested to me that I should hang out a shingle, as they say, and do a solo practice. And the problem from my perspective was I always like to think as a consumer. And at that point in my life, I'd been a consumer in a way that I hadn't been a business owner. But the question of what's the value proposition? Why would someone go to me as someone who at that point didn't have a lot of experience in family law, for example? And so then it was actually when I realized that there was a need within the community, that I realized that was a good reason that people would want to turn to me, even if I wasn't the most experienced person.
Yeah.
And so that was integral to my deciding to open my own practice.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. Did you see a lot of polyamorous or families like that? Like, did that come across your desk pretty often?
The non-traditional
The
families?
non-traditionals?
I basically this, I become connected with the community and made a lot of friends and just realized that there were plenty of people who were facing these issues. And really, I recognized that Diana Adams had been a leader, and Diana's still very much a leader to this day, but is a pioneer in representing polyamorous individuals and families. But law is a state by state practice.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
Diana's licensed in New York and maybe New Jersey. And that's it.
Right.
Mm.
And so there wasn't anybody who was doing it in DC or Maryland. So I figured I could be that person.
You know, it's funny. One of the real reasons why we wanted to do this show was because for years, we've been in the lifestyle ethically non-monogamous for 14 years now. We're a blended family ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I came to the relationship with 3 kids, and she came to the relationship with 2. And when we were out as a polyamorous couple, we got taken back to court one of many times by her ex, who basically was trying to claim that us being poly was an unsafe situation for the children and for the home, which was unfounded. And of course, we ended up winning that case. The judge didn't find that to be really an issue, but it has been brought up before. And we've talked to a lot of people in the community, and this is something that people live in fear with
Yeah.
because they don't know how this all works. Can you shed some light, like in your experiences out there with these kinds of situations? Is this something that people should be afraid of?
I think definitely the child custody thing is a concern. In my personal experience in DC and Maryland, it hasn't come to much.
Mhm.
There have definitely been times when someone's sexual activity and their connection to polyamory, multiple partners, has been an issue in litigation in these two cases that went to trial. And in both of those cases, my clients were thoroughly victorious, and judges found that it was completely not relevant, and it was the results were very gratifying
Right. Yeah.
for the clients. But in both cases, that's it's expensive, and
It
that
is.
you would rather not have to go through that custody litigation. That's a heavy cost financially and emotionally, and also in time.
It can, yeah. It can make you pretty afraid if you don't know what your rights are
Yeah.
as a parent. And I know it's on a judge by judge basis
Yeah, for
as
sure.
well.
For sure.
Obviously, if you're saddled with a certain judge that just doesn't see things that
Yeah.
way, then it can get pretty tough.
Yeah.
The scary thing about any child custody decision is that in every single state, judge makes a decision based on what the judge thinks is in the best interest of the child. And this is actually an issue on the best interest of the child standard, and how it interacts with polyamory is something that I'm the co-author of an academic article about, that we examined some of those issues. But basically, generally, there are a set of factors that in many states they are explicit in a statute, in a law passed by the state legislature. It says a judge must consider specific factors,
Mm.
and in other states it's more vague, or they're optional factors, or it may be. In Maryland, there's not actually a law that says which factors need to be considered, but there's case law that, previous cases, and they basically say, well, you follow, we call it the Taylor factors. There's a case Taylor versus Taylor, and the judge said, well, there's this factor and this factor. And so people say, okay, well, those factors. But the thing is that these factors are so broad. It's like the relationships between the children and people who are important to them, and
That's true.
the physical and mental health of everyone involved. And sometimes there's a few states have some like moral related language. And I mean, basically there is the opportunity for a judge to basically decide what they want, to, as long as the facts that they come up with are something that they could conclude based on something that they heard in the testimony, then they can decide that whatever they want is the important part, and come up with the result that they want to see. And then people take too much comfort in the idea of an appeal, because appellate courts don't look at things freshly, to do over. Appellate court needs to assume all the facts that a trial court found, unless you can like prove that this was like clearly wrong, that it's in the evidence that the judge just messed up. But there's really limited discretion. It's quite rare for a child custody decision to get changed on appeal. I have won a child custody appeal, but that was on a quite narrow situation. In that case, a judge made an order that the child was not to go more than 25 miles outside of the District of Columbia without a parent. And basically saying that effectively a parent couldn't restrict, that a parent couldn't designate a grandparent to take the child to
Oh,
the
wow.
beach, which is maybe 2 hours from where we live,
Yeah.
or or to go with a friend and the friend's parent to a theme park or some, is ridiculous. And there wasn't anything to support that. And so we were able to win that appeal because there was nothing in the record to support that. So, but that's the sort of thing that you need to have a scenario like that where, you can't get from A to B, that where you can end up changing things. And so, trial court judges have huge discretion, and the trial court judges, they live in the places that they work,
Mm.
and they tend to be associated with the predominating culture in their areas. And so really the risk to people is very dependent on where they live,
Mm.
Wow.
what county in most states their case is in. And if you live in a county that tends to vote for Democrats, you're unlikely to have a problem. And I think if you live in a very conservative county, a rural county, that gives much more of a risk.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's where it definitely comes to play, right? We're in Texas. Most of the counties around us are not not blue. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
And
we're yeah.
you're not in the big cities.
we're not in the big
Right.
cities,
Right.
we're yeah,
Yeah.
we're
South
actually
of Boston.
we're actually south of Boston and a little north of San Antonio. So we live in a very small county, but between two very large cities.
So you're just far enough. It's a different county, and so
Exactly.
it's that
Yeah.
small rural county.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it does come to play. So that is
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah. I do believe that we're close enough to the bigger cities where these judges that we have
Yeah.
are familiar and kind of have their ear to
They
the ground
we are.
on these
That's
situations, because it didn't sound like it was the first time this was sort of injected.
Right.
Like it's something that's come up before. Now, I do have some questions. I worked for several different law firms throughout the years, and I love to research. And I was very excited to get you on because there was a lot of stuff that I had questions on regarding the lifestyle throughout the years that maybe you can help me clear up. If you could, can you explain what de facto parent status is and how it protects someone who isn't a biological or adoptive parent but is still raising the child?
So de facto parent tends to be, and this, so I should first say that this varies somewhat between states, and
Sure.
not all
Oh, okay.
states recognize the de facto parenthood.
Mm.
But so basically, the first important thing to know about a custody case is that it is presumed that the child's biological or adoptive parents are, the appropriate people to have custody of the child. And it's a very high burden to convince a judge otherwise. And it's not even just a matter of convincing a judge that it would be in the best interest of the child. They're not just weighing it. Well, if it's, it'd be, the child would be okay with one parent, with the parent, but then this other person, the child would be great. Well, that's not good enough. That you usually have to show that the parent is unfit.
Mm.
So very high bar. Now, the de facto parent is a circumstance in which somebody who isn't a biological parent and didn't actually do an adoption can be treated as if they were an adoptive parent. in terms of the custody case. And so this is something that only comes into play when you have a dispute in court over custody.
Mm.
And basically, if you meet the criteria and court agrees that you meet the criteria, then the court can say, okay, we're going to consider you on an even playing field with a biological parent. So in many states, there's a 4-factor test. This started in Wisconsin. This was actually in Maryland. And I think 2008, the Maryland court was asked to recognize this and said no. And then in 2016, they were asked again and they changed their mind. They said yes. And so then you have to show that the biological or adoptive parent consented to and fostered the formation and establishment of you having a parent-like relationship with the child.
Mm.
You have to show that you and the child lived together in the same household and that you assumed obligations of parenthood by taking significant responsibility for the child's care, education, and development, including contributing toward the child's support without expectation of financial compensation. And the fourth thing is that you have been in a parental role for a length of time sufficient to have established a bonded, dependent relationship with the child.
Mm.
Now, that may sound complicated enough, but it actually gets more complicated than that. And in Maryland in particular, we had a case that really changed things again in 2021 because it was the question of that first part. The biological or adoptive parent consented to the formation and establishment of the relationship. Then the question was, okay, if you've got two biological parents, what if one person consented to and fostered it, but what if the other parent didn't? And they said that in general, both parents would have needed to have fostered the relationship.
Not just one. So not just one side.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So made it significantly harder to make that argument. And it's been a challenge in some cases where, for example, cases where the biological father is not in the picture and not someone who was involved. And so then a question, well, did the biological father consent and foster the relationship? No, the biological father wasn't involved at all.
At all.
Yeah.
So then what do you do? And
Yeah.
so those are some of these gray areas that then we have to argue about.
Oh man.
It's so complicated.
Yeah, that's got to be mind numbing.
So, I mean, so that's the child custody part. Now, with poly and ethical non-monogamy relationships, they're usually two not married couples, right? Or three people together. Would it help for them to have certain agreements like living arrangements and boundaries, or does that kind of stuff not even come
Kind of
into
like
play?
a contract or an
Yeah,
agreement,
do
like a
those things
written
even,
agreement.
yeah, do they even come into play in situations like this?
So it really depends on the exact relationships that you have and what you're concerned about. I think so I think the main aspects of family law,
Mhm.
the two really big buckets are child custody and divorce.
Mhm.
So we talked about child custody, and I think the divorce is an issue. And I think I just want to just briefly touch on divorce, and that people can be concerned that they may have an understanding about ethical non-monogamy, but then their spouse disputes it and says, you were cheating, and that, and again, these are the sorts of things that might be considered significant in different jurisdictions. In DC and Maryland, they really don't care as a general matter. They're not there to be the morality police,
Mm.
and we haven't seen that significantly affect either custody or financial issues.
I didn't
But
think about that.
even in Virginia, which I mean, right now I'm in Maryland, but I'm 10 miles from Virginia. So it's a world of difference than being in Central Texas or
Yeah.
in Arizona where I grew up, where, you could go for years without leaving the state.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of the big dynamics of practicing in my area, is that there's the DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I mean, I was just in 3 days ago, I was in all three. I mean, that's a normal thing.
Wow.
So that there's a lot of dynamics in general about and people moving from one state to another, and because people live literally on one side of the street, and it's you're in Washington D.C. and then you cross the street and you're in Maryland.
That's so cool.
So basically, I just want to say, in terms of the divorce side of things, that is sort of like a tip that I could use if someone is a little concerned about that. Because sometimes people enter lifestyle and they're exploring non-monogamy. They're trying to work on issues in their marriage, and that's a way that they're thinking that it's possible that they may be heading towards a divorce. And I would say you don't have to have like a written contract or something, but if you just have some clear text messages between each other, just sort of establishing your understanding, then that would be good evidence, just in case,
And actually,
to hopefully avoid having an issue if things don't work out, that you run into that issue.
yeah, that's some really good advice. We actually have some very close friends that are ethical non-monogamy, and they walked into this and they're now getting a divorce, and it's being thrown around, that it wasn't consensual, and it was only one-sided and stuff like that, more cheating. And so it's that's a really good idea. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, and I'm
But
sure it
don't
comes
worry,
up.
I got you on the podcast, so we're good.
Yeah, no, we're on the business together. The thing that I've always wondered about, because I know that, the judges vary, especially from
Mhm.
location to location, like you were saying. In your experiences, do judges ever assume that ethical non-monogamy is equal to or synonymous with bad parenting?
Mm.
So I have not personally encountered that, but I think that certainly this goes back to the best interest of the child standard. There are people who are judges, and judges are people, right? And
Mhm.
people have their biases, and so there are judges who, in their daily life as people, they make moral judgments, about people in non-monogamous dynamics, and they can apply those in any way they want, potentially.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed that you tout yourself as an attorney who is in the ethical non-monogamy field, as well as an kink. How have you had instances where kink has come up in legal matters before?
Yes. Yes. So, not as often, but and it often can overlap with the non-monogamy.
Sure.
People try to use things against someone that has overlap. For example, I had a client who has an account on FetLife and was posting pictures and videos of her with partners, and I think there may have been some pictures with some bruises, and the questions about the implications of that.
Mhm.
And if she was meeting people on FetLife, does that suggest that these were people who were particularly likely to be dangerous, or or a risk to the child, that
Wow.
kind of thing?
Okay. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I saw that, I was like, I really have got to explore how that can come up, because I couldn't think of a single thing on how that would apply.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes perfect sense when you're talking BDSM and that sort of thing. The other parent doesn't know what's happening. And yeah,
It can cause some
And
issues.
theoretically, with the kink stuff, there can be allegations of domestic violence
Yeah.
are um, are often very significant in a divorce context and sometimes in a child custody context. And, a lot of times the difference between kink and abuse is consent. And, if you just show, here are these pictures that I took of all these bruises and injuries and stuff, and he hit me, and
Wow.
that has the potential to be a major issue.
Wow.
Yeah, you would
I
think
didn't think
about
about that at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I was trying to connect those dots and I just could not do it. I was like, man, I got to ask this. Like, this is a big one for me. I was curious as far as the swinging aspect of the sexual portion of ethical non-monogamy in divorces, because this is something just this past year alone, we've had at least 3 different couples tell us that they're ending up in a divorce, didn't work out, that sort of thing. And so family law, that's really your milieu. But as far as just a conversation between us and Jonathan Lane, I know that this is not your expertise, but I know that this is one that has been thrown out often as a worry for people who are in the swinging lifestyle. And that's a lot of them keep major discretion because they don't want their bosses to find out. They don't want their place of employment to find out. Now, I know you're not an employment lawyer, so I know that that's a whole different area. But just on your own thoughts on the matter when it comes to this particular thing, um, what can a person do if they find out, say, their employer has found out about their lifestyle and their job is at risk, or maybe they lost their job? Is there anything that they can do? Is there something? Or should they go see an employment lawyer? Is it even worth fighting?
Unfortunately, the vast majority of jobs in this country are what we call at will employment,
Sure.
which is basically you can be fired, laid off for at any time for any reason. And, with just some specific exceptions written into the law that you can't be dismissed for your gender or for your race or for your age. And there's not any kind of protection like that for people in non-monogamous relationships, except there are maybe a couple ordinances, local ordinances in California and in Massachusetts that I think may touch on those issues. I can't remember at the moment which ones do, but certainly outside of those handful of towns and cities, there's really not much that you can do directly. Now, that's, there's a risk. At the same time, people sometimes fear the risk, fear that something bad will happen, but actually nothing happens. I'm in the DC area, so there's a huge number of people who work for the government, a lot of people who work for government contractors, tons of people who have security clearances. There's the sort of thing where 40 years ago, if you were gay, you couldn't have a security clearance.
Wow.
But things have changed a lot. And the basic idea of that is they don't want somebody to be able to be blackmailed. And so they'd give away secrets and stuff. And they also are concerned if somebody has big debt, that they might be vulnerable to somebody from the Chinese government through
Yeah.
somebody coming and offering them some money to give some information, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's a similar kind of thing, like, oh, well, I know that you do X, and I could make it public or something, that kind of thing. And really the optimal situation for somebody like that is if they're able to be out, and then they don't need to fear being outed. Obviously, that situation really depends on one's community and one's employer. And I mean, it's not risk free, but that's, I think, I mean, the safest thing is to be only doing things that you you think it would be okay with, that you wouldn't lose your job. But of course, easier said than done.
Easier said
Right.
than done.
Right. And that can really vary from person to person.
Yeah, that's true. where the law stands today, do you think that there's more states or cities that are more progressive about ethical non-monogamy? Or do you think that it's not? I mean, I feel like it's getting better, but are there more states
Yeah.
where it's
I feel like it's
progressive?
more out in the open now
Yeah.
than it used to be.
Definitely. I mean, I feel like through the vast majority of the country, I think pretty much everywhere, it's become a lot more well known. People who read newspapers, and even people who read BuzzFeed and that kind of stuff Page Six have been exposed more and more to stories of ethical non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, polyamory. And so, yeah, I mean, there's significantly increased awareness, and with awareness often comes acceptance.
That's true.
And with acceptance, see that laws coming out that maybe are more accepting of ethical non-monogamy. Is it even being included in there yet, or have we not reached that point?
Well, so I mean, it's really in a few towns and cities that there are these local laws
Mm,
that have uh that have been that have been passed.
wow.
And so it's really just in these handful of towns in California and in Massachusetts, where
Oh, that's
um where these things. So there's Cambridge and Somerville, Massachusetts, and I believe in Berkeley and Oakland, California,
wow.
that there are some protections, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Just the cool places,
Some of them, some of them.
right?
Now, how long have you been poly? I'm not going to go into too much of your personal experience, but you've been poly for
Yeah.
a while?
So yeah, it's been about 10 years that I've been a part of the community to one degree or another.
Okay.
Okay.
And so it was after within a year or so of being in the community that I realized that there was this need for my services,
Yeah, for
or
sure.
for the services of some lawyer who, was familiar with the community.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. You know, what I noticed when we first jumped into the ethical non-monogamous lifestyle, there wasn't a lot of resources that we could turn to. We had so many questions. I mean, obviously, we started a podcast, but there wasn't, there just wasn't a lot of readily available information that we could find to help shed light on things. And we used to,
Or even guide us.
yeah, and we used to go into community chat groups and things like that. And I felt like people just weren't really forthcoming with information. It was kind of like, well, Google it if you
Yeah.
want to know, that sort of thing. So it's nice to be able to have somebody who's experienced in a certain field and familiar with E&M to be able to shed some light on that. I think I think it's great that you're able to provide that service for a lot of people who are maybe afraid of what's to come and maybe afraid that their attorney won't understand them.
Yeah. So we should go back. You started to ask about individuals and couples and triads and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I was like, wait a second, we need to talk about divorce first. So I think the questions are, what are your goals? And that's what I would say. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Is it a question of property ownership?
Yeah.
That's number of people. Three people in a relationship come to me and they say, we want to buy property, the three of us or the four of us. And, how do we do that and that kind of thing. And there's nothing that prohibits three or four people from owning property together. But there's a lot of different people at play, mortgage lenders and banks and real estate agents. And they may just not be familiar with selling a house to, three or four people, a married couple and a third person, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so some people are just willing to learn, and there's others who have dealt with similar situations. And that uh, has been very useful for people and you're not having to reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
that they know, so in my area, I've learned of, lenders and agents and so forth who are comfortable with those kinds of things. Another big area is inheritance.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was gonna ask you.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's the big thing is you should have a will.
Mm.
I mean, anybody, it's smart for anybody to have a will. And, and once you write it, then, make sure that people have it. So if
Mhm.
something happens to you that they know that it was written. Because if you just have it, in a computer or in a drawer somewhere and you die and you didn't tell anybody, nobody knows that you had it.
Yeah.
But that's it's a will can be pretty simple, and it doesn't require hiring a lawyer. You can, I mean, there's some basic stuff that you could do, get information online, and you'd be in much better shape than not having that. But so basically, in terms of assets, most assets, what happens to them depends on what you say in a will.
Mhm.
And if you don't have a will, then there's a list, an order of family members that it goes to, starting with spouse and the children,
Mhm.
parents, and then it goes with cousins, and then eventually, if there's nobody else to give money to, then it goes to the government.
Ok.
But you have a choice about that. Now I will say that if if somebody is married, if they decide that they want to leave uh, all their money to their other partner, then that's something that their spouse could contest. If there's not an agreement otherwise, the spouse is entitled to have at least half of an estate, or one third if the person also has at least one child.
Oh.
So the will is not everything. And also there's other things, major things that don't pass by a will. For example, retirement accounts.
Mhm.
And that there you with your retirement account, they should have the name of somebody on file who the account should go to if something happens to you.
Yeah.
And so just doing a will isn't enough to take care of that. But that's an important step. And and certainly then the other aspect is for people who are parents of one or more children under 18 is what happens to the children. And so I think, and the first thing to know is that if there's two parents and the parents are not together, something happens to one parent, kid's going to go to the other parent.
Right.
At least the other parent wants them. But if it's not the parents, then if there's not another parent in the picture, then it may be that the preference that's in a will can make a big difference about
Mhm.
whether a child would be living with the partner who may be the person who the child was living
Mm.
with the deceased person,
Yeah.
or is it going to be some other relative, a grandparent, a cousin, that kind of thing. Definitely good for people to have wills.
Wills, and I was also thinking like medical directives or power of attorneys and stuff like that. I think
Yep.
all of that is very important, especially if you say
End
if
up in
you
the hospital.
end up in a hospital or if something kind of medical issue arises and you just need that power of attorney for that. Because if you're not married, if you're not the spouse, you have to have some kind of directive, or I don't even know what happens and
Yep.
somebody else makes decisions for you, like just a doctor.
Well, so my understanding is in the absence of a specific designation, then
Hmm.
they go to the next of kin,
Hmm.
which if you're not married to someone, then there's not that legal relationship. But so you can with the power of attorney, authorize someone to act on your behalf.
That's a really good those are really good things that I think everybody should be doing.
If you're raising kids or if you're just in a serious relationship, it's really important to do
It
that.
really is.
What are the top 3 things that ethically non-monogamous people should set up before issues arise? Would you say that they should get these, like a power of attorney and a custody agreement, all that stuff? Should they write up all this stuff ahead of time? in their relationship before problems start to arise, or should they just cross that bridge when they get to it?
I It's hard to give a top 3 because and this is also individual, and it's really specific to what are your relationship dynamics and what are the potential issues? And, are there concerns about issues between spouses, for example? Or is it, something about wanting protections in case you're in the hospital, or the wills, and in case you suddenly pass away. So yeah, it's really, I mean, when I talk to someone who contacts me related to, non-monogamy, that, outside of the context of, a divorce or custody case, it's very particular to, okay, what exactly are you looking for? What are the things that are concerning you? What are the things that you want to have happen? And it's really very customizable.
Mm.
Um, I think that in general, it is useful for people to have something written down, an understanding between them, particularly when a pre-existing relationship is opened up, sort of something where you get on paper that you're both clear about what you're doing and you're on board with it. And I think that can be useful. Hopefully, wouldn't ever need to be in court, but there end up being disputes. And I mean, I have a divorce case right now that, I mean, we're mostly arguing about money stuff, but then the husband says, "Oh, well, you had this other partner, and I want to get reimbursed for the money that you spent on the hotel rooms to, spend nights with this person." Uh, and 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 there's them saying, "Well, this actually, when you were with this other person, that violated our agreement." And the other person, "No, that didn't violate the agreement. When you were with this other person, that violated our agreement."
Just the back and forth.
Memories are imperfect, and they're always changing. And so it's not a bad idea to, just have something written down. And even if it's something like, a text message, like, just to be clear, this is what we're agreeing to.
Yeah.
And the other person said, "Yes, I agree." That's enough.
Yeah.
That's good
Just
enough.
so, yeah.
That's
Screenshot.
dramatic. Screenshot it.
Yeah.
Save it.
Now, if you could wave a magic wand and change one law tomorrow to better protect ethical non-monogamy folks, what would it be?
Ooh.
Well, so I think that actually the employment discrimination would be a
Mhm.
big one. That I think that a lot of people live in fear of
Mhm.
that employment discrimination, that there isn't a protection, and it keeps people in the closet, and it just creates anxiety.
Yeah.
That
It
it
really
does.
does. And do you ever think that, I mean, I know we touched base a little bit on it on courts if they'll ever catch up to like ethical non-monogamy people. Do you think that we're getting there? Like we're actually going to be able to live in these type of relationships open? Do you think we're going backwards?
I think that more and more people are
Yeah.
open, and they can be, and I think that it's a gradual cultural shift, and not everybody is on board with it, but I think that there's a predominating acceptance of a greater diversity of family forms and relationships, and it's far from universal, but it's been substantially increasing over time.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
on. Right on. We're rounding about finishing up here, but I have a specific scenario that I've seen quite a bit. And considering that you're a family attorney and deal with divorce and that sort of thing, this specific situation I've seen several times where it's a throuple or even four people and they're all in this relationship together, polyamorous relationship. None of them are married, but all of them have been together, say, for 4 years, 4 or 5 years, something like that. They all come into this relationship with stuff, And over the past 4 years, they've collected stuff as couples or as a quad. And then at some point things fail and they end up breaking it off. Now, obviously, none of them are married, so they wouldn't have to go through a divorce per se. But I don't think it's as simple as just breaking up and taking your stuff, is it? Like, is this some scenario that would have to play out in court?
The reason that you have to go to court to get a divorce is that you have to go to the court to get married.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the government is involved in marriage from the beginning. You get a marriage license from the government. And so, if you're dating somebody, then, the government is not involved in that. And even if you're dating somebody for decades,
Yeah.
even if you are living with somebody for 50 years, the government isn't involved in that.
So, like a common law marriage kind of thing, is that not a thing?
Common law marriage, there is a thing called common law marriage. It is in only some states.
It's definitely
But
here.
basically, so yes, it's true. Texas does recognize
Yes.
common law marriage, but so you can't accidentally become common law married.
Okay.
Mhm.
You need to have an agreement
Ah,
to be married,
okay.
and you need to represent yourself to people that you're married.
Mhm.
I gotcha.
So those are prerequisites in those places where common law marriage is an option. But so basically that's where, the thing is that it's an option other than getting a license,
I
Okay.
gotcha.
right?
Sure.
It is you say, all right, yes, let's be married. All right. And then you say, this is my husband, this is my wife. And, and then you go on, and then that's common law marriage. You don't, by living with someone for 7 years or 25 years or something, that doesn't make you accidentally married.
Yeah, so that's a common misconception that I hear
Very
a lot of
common.
people say is, "Oh, we've been together it's been 8 years, so we're common law married." And it's like,
No.
really? Okay. I honestly, I've never known anything about that. So this is the first that I'm hearing about it. All I've ever heard was the misconception. So
Yeah.
that's great information to have, especially for our area. So that's great.
I
That's
love
great
that.
to hear. Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for hanging out with us today and breaking this down. This is one of those conversations that every ethical non-monogamy couple and family needs to hear.
Absolutely. And for those listening, if you want to connect with Jonathan or learn more about his work, check out JD Lane Law. We'll drop the links in the show notes as well as in our blog that we accompany with the actual show.
Yeah. And don't forget, you can always find Beyond Monogamy everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook, Reddit, and YouTube. And just search Beyond Monogamy with Adam and Pris.
Yeah, and we're also streaming every Thursday at 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. Central on fullswapradio.com, so you can catch us there too.
Yeah. And if you like this episode, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. Leave us a review. That's how we grow. We keep bringing you amazing guests like Jonathan.
That's right. So thank you, Jonathan, for being here.
Yeah. Thank
And with that, we will see you guys next week.
you. All right. Bye.